Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Improv Network podcast. This is a series of conversations aimed at building stronger connections throughout the improv community. I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Bob Wick.
And we are your education team for the Improv Network. You can go to theimprovnetwork.org and check out all sorts of great resources, interviews, blogs, and an Improv FAQ page with videos like conversations and mini lectures on improv topics. We're very excited to have our guest today, who is a performer and teacher based out of the San Diego area. And he is also a play consultant and the founder of Breakthrough Play. It is Gary Ware. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Oh my gosh, such an amazing welcome. You guys are all amazing. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Our children audience love you.
It didn't even register me with it. It was all kids.
Yeah.
Yay. I was just impressed by the push of a button reveal that you have an effect set up in front of you. But yeah, please keep the kid cheers going.
When you're a performer and you're forced to stay at home for like 15 months, you get very resourceful.
Oh yeah.
Well, I want to launch into the Breakthrough Play, but let me ask you first, because obviously, you jump on a stream, and I'm sure a lot of the time the reaction is what I said, which is like, oh shit, you got a great setup, like great camera, just great composition of the setup and the background and everything. Is that something that you were doing before pandemic, or is that something that you did just entirely start doing to adapt to virtual?
How new is your mic?
How new is that mic, man?
The mic I've had for years, but all of this is piece by piece over the last year and some months, because again, I'm used to just being in person, and I had the mic just because, every now and then I'll record a podcast episode. It was nothing necessarily video related. So I always have a good mic, that was like the thing. But then when everything shut down and I was forced to do things virtually, when I first started, I was in a corner, literally a corner with my laptop camera. And I was like, this is not going to work. And then slowly I added something, and then slowly added something else. And I would consult with people, and then oh, you need this. And then the Amazon boxes will start to pile up. And so I like to apologize in advance. I'm probably the reason why Bezos is building that yacht, that second yacht, because I just started buying things just to make my setup a little bit more.
Oh, the SS Gary? Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, that's amazing, and it's so funny to see the arc too, because obviously virtual stuff had been getting more and more professional since 2008 or 2010 or something, and the standard all of a sudden kept going higher and higher, and then as soon as the pandemic hit, the standard went down, where people are more willing to watch stuff that's lo-fi or low grade, whatever. They're doing their best. It's virtual. Everyone's adapting. And then you see it start to rapidly ramp back up to where now the new, we're starting to figure it out, and the new standard is back.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And you know how at the beginning of the pandemic, in the real world, toilet paper and bottled water disappeared. In the virtual world, cameras disappeared. You couldn't find a green screen or a ring light,
utility stands. Yeah, little utility stands. Yep.
Yeah. They were going on eBay for hundreds of dollars. So I'm glad that I had a little bit of tech going into it. And then you're right. Everyone just accepted the crappy qualities. Hey, we're doing the best we can. We're in a pandemic. And then to be honest, what we see, what I have here, didn't really come about until probably July, August. So, pandemic started in March, and then, we got through the rough period, and then it was we're still going to be here. Oh
Yeah,
crap.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Double down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I could nerd out about that stuff for days, but let's get to breakthrough
Why we're
play.
here.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So you are founder of Breakthrough Play, which how to categorize it? It's a website. Is it a company? It's an organization, a service. It's all those things. Or
Philosophy.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a way of living. This
yeah.
is the way. But it started. It started as a website, to be honest, where I was categorizing and journaling like my experience in improv and play, and it was just more of a personal thing. And then I
Okay.
started sharing my philosophy with friends and colleagues. It was never meant to be honest. It was never meant to be a company.
Okay.
But out of desperation, when I was running this digital marketing agency, and my business partner essentially out of nowhere broke up with me and was like, "Hey, I think we need to go our separate ways." And I
Well,
was at this crossroads of like, do I get a real job again or do something else? I decided, hey, I think I have something here with this facilitation stuff, and then I decided to give it a shot, and here we are.
yeah. And so tell us a little bit about like at this point, as it has evolved to this point, like it is a consulting service and a facilitation service, and so
Yes.
companies are hiring you to come and incorporate improv and just play in general into their workspace.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I tell people, using the power of applied improvisation and what I call purposeful play, we can tackle challenging subjects, and we can sort of level up those soft skills, if you will, that everyone needs to be successful.
Mhm.
And compared to most trainers who come in and talk at you and say, this is how you have
Right.
effective communication or blah blah blah, we actually do things so people can experience it in a low stakes environment, and then as a result they're more likely to, when the stakes are higher, to be able to exhibit those skills.
Yeah. If you're laughing, you're learning.
Yeah, yeah. If you're laughing, you're learning.
I'm gonna write that down. Yeah,
Laughter is life's educational sponge.
Yeah, it is. It is
it
because
is.
there's an emotional attachment to that information that's joyous. You're like positive reinforcement. So yeah, so
Agreed.
you take it in better rather than like going through a flip chart and just like here you go. You're bored and just expected to retain this thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you
Yeah,
do enough for the test, right? You remember when we were in school and we would cram and cram and cram, like fill our brains with knowledge so we could take the test.
yeah.
If schools are really smart, they would give you a second test 2 weeks later to see who really knows the information.
yeah.
Uh,
You remember? Yeah,
because
Oh,
the fact of the matter is, like,
yeah.
if you don't do anything with it within 14 days, it will be as if you didn't learn it. That's like
Yeah.
true fact. If anyone's ever seen Inside Out, that Pixar movie, they, in a very simplistic way, explain something very complex of how the brain works. And the brain, has like long term memory, short term memory, and the way that we see, is that we cram and we keep it in short term memory, but it doesn't go to long term memory. The thing about play, the thing about experiential activities is that because we are using all of our senses, because we are getting excited, we're going through what is called a peak emotional experience, we're more likely to be able to retain it and recall it later.
yeah. And so obviously in the last I guess I don't know how long it's been since like the idea of applied improv was really more sensational and like sought after by companies, but like 5-ish years or something, right?
Yeah.
um, and what it reminds me of when I hear people whose like main job is that, or who do a lot of the applied improv with companies, it just really reminds me of what I've read about Viola Spolin, who's like the godmother of improv, and she was doing it as like social service work for like youth that it was having a harder time like learning in regular school programs, but that was like kind of its original purpose, or like modern improv originally purposed that way, as like an education tool and a way to infuse skill development and social growth and everything. And then it became like more and more entertainment for its own sake. But like, it just seems like now, okay, well, of course it would eventually come back to being a really viable way to get people to reinvigorate a learning space, a workspace, any kind of like professional development, like that. Those things, it seems like more obvious than it maybe would have been like 20 years ago when like long form was really taken off. That most people weren't really jazzed about. Like, you can also use this for corporate, like. But now it seems like a little bit more obvious that, like, of course, that's kind of where it started, and of course that would eventually be where it ends up, right?
Agreed. Yeah, and it's one of those things where, and it's, I wish it would just be that easy to be like, hey, we need to have this, and people are like, oh yeah, because to be quite frank, I actually have to like sort of reverse it. Where at first I thought like, yeah, applied improv, this is exactly what your team needs, but you're like, no, we don't got time for that. That seems like sort of childish, and what you want us to spend $1,000 on what? And then and so, however, they need skill building, they need all these things, right. And so I've learned to like be very like sort of ninja like, where I come in and I'll say do like what every good consultant would do, and say do an assessment and say, all right, what are your challenges, blah blah blah, and then they say, yeah, we need some training on X, Y, and Z. Lately, because of the pandemic, a lot of people are trying to help their teams with burnout and exhaustion and stuff like that. And so, and I was like, all right, great. Well, we have a few options. I can come and, sort of lecture at your team, and that's, that'll be great. You can have a check mark and blah, blah, blah. But, that investment that you put into your team, is going to be wasted because they're not going to retain it. They may know it long enough, but that's what companies are used to, right? They're like, oh, bring a trainer in X, Y, and Z. And I say, well, the option 2 is we can do some experiential activities that will allow your team to experience it firsthand, so that they're actually practicing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that when it comes, push comes to shove, they are more likely to do it. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll do that. And then we're doing it. And then I'm like, guess what? We're doing improv. We're playing. And then they're like, you got me.
Yep. Don't call it improv. Don't call it improv. Don't call it improv. It's improv.
Oh.
It's like the Scooby-Doo thing. Like, rip off the mask.
Well, that's interesting. So is that the majority of places, or just some places you really have to code the language to kind of Trojan horse your way in?
Unfortunately, it is. It is a majority of companies where, for some reason, the P word, the I word, the A word, it's taboo. They don't like to hear about play or improv or applied improv. But the interesting thing is, once they've experienced it and they know what it is, then they're like, oh yeah. We should have had this a long time ago. Well, you didn't, and then, it just wasn't seen as something that was effective for whatever reason. There are some companies that, that are a little bit more progressive and they're open to that. But a good majority of them, unfortunately, still are like, I don't know, a little bit old fashioned. They remind me of Blockbuster Video. You remember that? Blockbuster?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I just watched the last Blockbuster. Have you seen that documentary?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. So good. Anyways, back on subject.
Go ahead, Bob.
So you walk into the room. It's full of new people. Where do we get started? Do we just start with zip, zap, zop, or is there, what technique do you especially now, after everything's been closed down and with all the extra rules, how do we facilitate?
You walk into a room where
how do you do that?
Yeah, some places are, I guess, reopened, but go ahead.
Believe it or not, I did my first in-person workshop this last week, and it was funny because I'm so used to now virtual. And this was going to be a virtual thing, and then they realized that Monday was a holiday, and that how I've been with a lot of companies as a way to sort of help them and sort of provide value. I would commandeer meetings that they already had. So they would have these standing meetings, and I would come in, and instead of doing their normal sort of meeting stuff, we would
Right.
do activities. And so that's how it was originally scheduled. I was going to come into this meeting and do some stuff, and then they realized, oh,
Yeah.
Tuesday is the first day back from a long holiday. We actually need that meeting to do other stuff. And then
Right,
they
yeah.
said, do you want, we have a community lunch at noon. Do you want to do that? Again, not thinking that it was going to be in person. I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'm so glad that I went back and read the email because they said, we'll get your lunch and we're meeting here. And I was like, oh, this is in person. But anywho, it went great. And you're absolutely right. Like, this was outside, it was at the park. And my main thing of how I structure my sort of activities, especially with groups that I haven't necessarily worked with before,
Right.
is you have to ease them into it, and then you get to like some of the hard stuff. So yeah, that's why something like Zip Zap Zop is a great thing to start with because they're like, oh wow. We're actually sort of getting in sync. Oh, we made some
Yeah.
mistakes. Yay! Like it's great. And then, they're starting to loosen up. And I like to say they're getting that dose, which is an acronym for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Those neurochemicals that actually are useful in team development and ensemble development. But for this one, we started with pass the clap, and I made a joke about pandemic and not trying to get close to each other. It was really 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 fun and cheesy, but the whole point of doing these is just to ease them into the material, so that when
Yeah.
we do some of the more complicated things, they've gotten used to failing. They've gotten used to trying something different. If I would have started with some of the advanced stuff, it probably would have just everyone would have been like, can't compute too much.
You
What
know,
does
yeah.
your character want right now?
Right? Let's get into yes. What is the game?
What-
All right, people. What is the game here? How
You're
can we
like
hide
the
this? Yeah. So one thing that I'm just I'm conscious of because we've talked on the show about improv, just the way that it carries over to the general lifestyle, and also the observation that in the pandemic, where you would think that improv would very quickly become deprioritized for a lot of people, and I'm sure for a lot of people it was. But what I was surprised by is just seeing how many people beyond that really reconnected with how essential it is for them, whether it's performing or just seeing people and jamming as a social thing, or just spiritually, it's in a time of crisis that they need some kind of play. And I was watching one of your TED Talks before this, and you had mentioned that play is wired into our biology, and that people need play. And I guess I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that idea and how much, play is essential to for a lot of people, if not everyone.
Yeah. So one thing with that, if you think about a time when you were playful, you probably time went by like that. You were probably super engaged, super present. If there were other people around, you were enjoying the company. If there were obstacles, you welcomed the obstacles. It is just something that is amazing. However, as we get older, we take it for granted. We think about, oh, this is childish, this is frivolous. And the interesting thing is, from 0 to about 9, everything that children do is through some sort of play. There was a researcher, her name is Karen Previs, and she was researching how patterns are formed, synapses in the brain. And through normal repetition, you can create a synapse in about 400 to 420 repetitions. And she found that if you incorporate play, you can shortcut that to about 20.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. And it was just because of what we talked about of, it's a very sensory experience. It's very enjoyable. It's very pleasurable. And that is what it is. And the interesting thing is that when you take away play, Dr. Stuart Brown, he talks about play deprivation. You get a lot of the situations like mental health situations that we were experiencing at the beginning of the pandemic. Extreme stress. You start to get depressed or lonely and things like that. And because we are what are called neotness creatures, in that we retain our juvenile features through adulthood. You look at any mammal in the wild, they essentially do what is ever necessary for survival, right? Like if you think of a bear in the wilderness, the bear is going to do whatever the bear needs to do to survive. That bear, even though it knows that play is a very vulnerable experience, where when it's playing, because it's so focused on the task at hand, the play, it could be, sort of compromised, it still plays.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But us adults, again, that we're focused on productivity, like all these other things, play just seems like something that is so far removed from that. And in fact, the way that our brains are structured, where play comes into play, I guess you can say, is in the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain. However, when you're stressed, you're activating the lizard brain, the fight, flight, or freeze, and so they're two completely different parts of the brain. And so that's one of the reasons why at the start of this pandemic, people couldn't even think about play. However, play is the
Right.
antidote.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
so wild. Like in my sort of researching this and understanding all these things, of when I think about any time where I'm super stressed or burnt out, it's I probably wasn't playing, because I was in that lizard brain where I couldn't see play as something that I would do, and stuff like that. So it's really fascinating. So it's not like we intentionally do that. It's just that the environment created that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to point out that, like, I'm sure we're preaching to the choir for like, our audience is obviously all improvisers, people who have been exposed to it, probably, I'm sure understand improv has value beyond just like entertainment and funny. But like,
Right.
I think that, like, for me, the longer that I'm doing it, the more I forget, like, there is like a sort of like pre-improv me where it's like, I don't know, you kind of, you forget exactly what degree of value and like where that value comes from, that it's not just because you have like a nice hobby. There's something special about the idea of play, and the way that, like, you could play guitar by yourself, and that's also very therapeutic and a form of play for you personally. But there's also like the social aspect of it, and there's this idea of like going through, I can't remember who I borrowed this from somebody that I'll have to credit if I can think of it, but the idea that, like, somebody asked, why is improv so therapeutic, and it was a very nice summary. It might have actually been Kevin Dorff on a podcast at the Detroit Improv Festival, but he said, well, we're putting ourselves through crisis, but without like the real threat or repercussions at stake, right? So we get to experience getting through crisis in like what feels like a chaotic environment, but really doesn't present any threat to us at all. So like there's positive, like, constructiveness to that. And I was like, holy shit, like, like that is like, just something that I don't think about when I'm doing, once I'm so deep in improv and I'm surrounded by a lot of improvisers, I just kind of take those types of framings for granted. And so, yeah, it's fascinating to me that, especially like, obviously you sound like you've done so much research, and the like psychology of it is just a nice reminder of like where that value comes from and how great that value is.
Yeah, agreed. And the interesting thing is, it's like we do something and we do it like just for doing it. That's the cool thing about play. It's like the play is not necessarily about the outcome; it's about the experience.
Right.
And then we've done it for such a long time, and then we like sort of reverse engineer of like, why was that so amazing? Because I don't think, again, like when people started doing improv for like theater stuff like that, I don't think they were like, you know what, this is going to make me the most amazing person in the world. It was just like, we did it. And because, you probably, it sounds cliche, but I feel like it's somewhat true. Like how you do anything is how you do everything. Like once you start learning the tenets of improvisation, it's not like the moment you leave the stage, it just turns off because it becomes more muscle memory.
Yeah, that's so
And
funny. So
yeah.
just real quick, that is like the opposite of what you were saying about like you have to like bait people and give it like corporate language to trick the corporate people into being like it's improv. And then with improvisers, it's like it starts with just like this is just for fun, I promise. And then a couple of years in, you're like, wait a minute, this is like affecting my life for the better too. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Gary. Are there important elements needed in play to help that, like something like competition or having a goal or some kind of challenge to overcome, or I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. Like, are there elements that are necessarily or that are necessary to make play? I don't know. More of a growth experience.
Well, I think so. Yes, the researcher Jane McGonigal. You can look her up on YouTube. She has a few amazing TED Talks about play in games and how it affects us in a positive way. And she said that there is just as much research that shows the positive aspects of play, of how when you're in a play-like environment, it can help you be more resilient and it can help you like sort of relationships, as the research that shows that it's detrimental to our health and our well-being. And she said there was one key thing that she saw in the research that allowed people to have that growth sort of mindset, and it's their purpose. Like if you're using play as a way to not do something, and then that becomes your sort of rhythm, that your routine, you will continue to use play in that thing. And that's like with anything. If you think about it, could be eating, it could be exercise. Like some people, they like, I don't want to deal with the day, so they just sort of get into exercise, and that becomes like their pattern. Like that's just part of how like patterns are created. But she found a lot of people like improvisers and people that play cooperative games and stuff like that, and even like competitive like sports, they go in with like like what we said, this is going to be fun, this is going to be enjoyable, and then they start it starts affecting them. And so that's the first thing. One, it's the purpose. But if you think about play and why it's so amazing, is that, and I learned this from her name is Gwen Gordon. She's an amazing person that worked on Sesame Street as a Muppeteer. She made like Muppets, and then she worked for IBM. She's like super whimsical, super creative, super just amazing. And then she was diving into play, and she was a play mentor to me. But she was saying, and this is sort of widely, research that's out there, anyone can find this. But for play to be, pure play, it has to be in an alert, non-stressed frame. Like I said, animals and humans and stuff that are stressed, you can't play. The other thing, it has to be intrinsically motivated. Like when we first got into improv, it's like, wow, the pure pleasure of just doing this art form. And then it has to be done freely, not coerced. Yes, there are some forms of play where you're sort of forced into it, and it's not true play. And maybe because you're forced in it the first time, and then you see the benefit, then maybe the second and third time you go into it freely. And that's why when I do these workshops, a lot of times, when I do these corporate workshops, people don't necessarily want to be there. It's like, oh, we're doing this thing. So I slowly invite people to play. And I even tell people, I said, go as slow as fast as you want to, because I want to create that environment where they want to be there. And then the other thing about play is it's structured by the rules that we invent. We have this agreement that we are playing, and this is how we're playing. Improv has structure. If you're doing long form in improv, it has a structure. The Herald has a structure. The Armando has a structure, and we all agree to that structure, and that's how the play happens. If you play, any sort of board game, it has a structure, and then the big thing. And it's funny I have to mention this, but it's fun. It's pleasurable. Like you get pleasure from doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the criteria for play to take place. And they found that when you're in a play-like state, you are suspending your own like life rules for the rules of the game. Take, for example, golf. I'm not a really good golfer. And I've tried it a few times. It's just not my jam, but I'll go with some friends, just, whatever. I like to drive the golf cart. But nonetheless, if you think about the rules of golf, you have to hit a tiny ball with a stick into a hole 300 and something yards away. That is not effective. That is not an effective way to
Right.
get that ball into the hole. Like, there should be other effective ways. However, you suspend your own beliefs for the rules of the game. And as a result of that, when people do that, they found that if you put like EKG machines on their heads, their brain waves get in sync because we're all suspending belief for the rules of the game. And that's why, again, thinking about my very first improv class, some of those people that I met in that level 1, we are still amazing friends today.
Yeah.
Because again, we suspended all belief for the rules of improv, and like you said, it was like little mini crises that we all averted together. Again, not knowing that, again, it's low stakes, and then we became closer.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So on that note, I want to talk about emotional intelligence too, because there's the bonding, anything from like the bonding that you experience with like people that you play with or on a team or in classes or in a team building workshop, to also just like playing characters, exercising, putting yourself in a scenario or other people's shoes develops like empathy, right? So and emotional intelligence was something that you used as a term in your bio and on your website, and I just wanted to bring that into it too, because what you're talking about of that bonding experience brings up emotional intelligence, and so I'm wondering, like, how does that come into play for your work and like your personal philosophy on improv?
Yeah. And so again, I didn't think, like, when I first started taking an improv class, I don't have a theater background. I just heard that improv would be a cool thing that would help me, sort of think on my feet, and it's a lot of fun. And so I took it. And then I was hooked. I was roped into the cult of improv, like, from day one. And it wasn't until like months later when someone actually mentioned, "Man, Gary, like, something's up, like something's different about you." And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And it wasn't until years later where I started looking back and then realizing, oh, I'm playing again. Oh, I'm doing, like, I'm learning these skills and I'm applying it in real life, like, unconsciously. That I start to realize something's up. And then when I really started diving into the work, I started realizing, because of these games, again, that we join freely with our own will, and we, for the rules of the game, we accept them. All right, cool, I'm going to play this character. This character's this and this. And then you're right, you start to see things from a different perspective. And then something unconscious happens where, because you did that and you had that experience, you start to have a deeper understanding for someone else. Again, I can't think of anything else that will give you that experience, because if you think about it, take any sort of argument that you have with someone that you really love. You sometimes go in that to win. You have a point of view, they have a point of view, and you're like, I'm gonna win. And that's not real play. That is not real play. That's like where play stops. But like you're not, like, your motive may have been to get a point across, but when you get into that crucial conversation, you go from trying to get your point across to trying to win, and then you stop listening to the other person. You stop seeing it from their point of view. And if someone would have said, "Hey, how about you just see it from their shoes?" A lot of times, because you're so stuck in your way,
Right.
you're not going to do that. Well, in an improv game, rant rave, you actually do that freely,
Yeah.
and welcomely. And then, like, again, we practice this in a low stakes environment, and you do it enough times, it becomes like unconscious, where you like start to think, oh, all right, cool, yeah, maybe they might have a point.
Right.
Yeah, you get better at adopting a point of view that's not your own, and that is huge. Like that, again, it's like these kind of like hidden gems of just the conditioning of improv to. I think about like brainstorming because I've led some corporate workshops, and the analogy that I would make is I was creating a lot of short form games with our friend Pete at the time, and I would be like, we would do this thing where we would get a suggestion of a celebrity or a fictional character at the top of a jam, at the beginning of a jam, and when we go out on the sidewalk, and we would quickly come up with a short form game based on that suggestion of a character or celebrity, and then play it by the end of the jam. So we had very limited time to like come up with it and then execute it. And that sounds so frivolous, but like really what it did is it conditioned me to be a better exchanger of ideas, because like obviously like under that urgency, Pete and I would go on the sidewalk, and I might have an idea, or one of us would have an idea that sucked, right? Like, but instead of being like, no, let's say no until we get the one that works, we go, okay, we both feel that knee-jerk reaction of like, I don't think that doesn't make any sense. Like you go, okay, well, if we had to make that work, which we might have to, how could we make it work? And just that conditioning to, instead of being like, no, that's no good, what's the next one? You go, okay, what can we get out of this? And you skip the, I got better at skipping that like emotional response of like, no, it's no good. It actually like more so than when I was doing scenes, because like that theater to me, I like understood is like, that's what you do when it's imaginary and whatever, but like it's that kind of like halfway blend between something that you practically have to then go execute in front of people, and you're off stage during the brainstorming process. So like in workshops and corporate settings, that same sort of conditioning I imagine would also happen, where like you have, it's like a workplace exchange, so there's still like the reality of like the people you're working with, and it's but you're not doing like a show, so it's like halfway between the like pure theater and like corporate team building world. And you just conditioning your mind to how to treat each other's ideas is huge.
Well, yeah, really quick, also to piggyback on it, another skill that's similar to that is how to get your idea out there in a way that other people can see what you're brainstorming. Because that was something I learned. Don't get frustrated that the other person can't read your mind. Yes, you initiated an idea, but they might not be able to see it, and you should be okay with that. Maybe you have to explain it in a way that they can relate to and not get frustrated, so we can all understand and move past this.
Wow. Yes, Bob. It is a two-way street. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like so often we put the what to do instruction in terms of like the person who's like when somebody tells you something, this is what you're supposed to do with what they tell you or express. But also there's the other side of like, well, how can you be better about your expectations and your method for just expressing something on the other side of that? Like if you're the person who's waiting for the other person's response because of what you just said, like how can you get better at being in that role too?
Yeah, that's huge. And so again, this all happens in improv, in in the theater, and it's a normal, like it's actually a very important skill to learn in the real world. But to go up to someone and say, Bob, how you explain that makes no sense to us. A lot of times we get very personal. However, if we play it in a low stakes, fun environment, and then we go back and debrief and we think about it, you are open to the fact like, oh yeah, you know what? You're right. Like that was kind of hard for me to articulate. Maybe there's some things in my head that I should have said out loud. And then we go back and we, all right, what else could we do? And we brainstorm all these ideas. And then because the brain's always connecting the dots, we can say, how does this relate to things outside of this game? And that's where people start to realize, oh, you know what? That one time when I was talking to Nancy, I thought my idea was the most amazing idea, and she gave me this blank look. Maybe I should have realized X, Y, and Z. Again, because we're in an alternate reality, and then we bring it back to our reality, and people start to understand because we were playing.
Yep.
Yeah. And you just put less personal stakes in the idea that like, well, maybe my idea wasn't clear. Like it did.
Yeah.
They were right. It made no sense, and that's okay. Like, and there, you don't like feel the need to dismiss your idea because the way you express it made no sense. It's just that saying, yeah, that made no sense doesn't feel like an attack anymore when you kind of like diffuse and disarm playful ways of saying like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And like you said, it starts off being a very personal thing, but you can learn to let it not be personal and be like, oh yeah, you're right. Let me start over, and that's okay. Like it's as simple as that.
Well, I think we just fixed everybody, guys. We did
You're
it.
welcome.
You're welcome.
Right? World fixed. If only it was that easy.
Oh, God. We should have done this in 2018.
I know, right?
Yeah. But so, yeah, Gary, we are coming toward the end of our time, but what you got? Breakthrough Play.
Yes.
Obviously you have the website. If people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can go to the website Breakthrough Play.
That's the best place.
If you're watching this, hello. My name is Gary. Where you can, I think I'm a friendly person. You can reach out and say hi. I'm on the social medias. I'm trying to limit that because I watched The Social Dilemma and then it freaked me out a little bit. So I'm
Totally.
just trying to put a little bit distance. But yeah, you can go to my website. Yeah. You can reach out wherever you connect with people and.
Yeah. Before we met, I did some research and I went onto your website's gorgeous. That's the life I'm living now. Like, ooh, great website, sir. And then when you at the end it explains how you were in digital marketing at some point. I'm like, oh, this all makes sense because wow, the best looking website of any improviser I ever met.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, great job. So. Even if you don't want to learn about Gary, just check out his website. It's thing of beauty.
Yeah, go there for what is it? UX? What's the term for? That's UX, right? User experience.
UX, yeah, right. User experience, yeah.
Yeah, go there for the UX and stay for Gary.
Yeah, and stay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, excellent. It's really been fantastic talking to you, Gary. We really appreciate you joining us and talking about your philosophy. And I we've talked about like we want to do like one episode where we were like, let's do one on just like improv for life skills. And by the end of it, we were like, this could be like a whole sub series in its own right because there is so much to unpack about how improv can influence your life and your work and everything. So thank you for giving us this time to talk about all those great things that we really probably could benefit from spending more time on, more than just like the fun and giggles of improv.
Yeah. Can I leave with one thing? Because I like to put a bow on things. And I like to say like, so this card right here, like you may not choose which cards in life you're dealt, but it's all about I have slippery hands. It's all about essentially what you do with the time that you do with that. That's what it's all about.
Whoa.
So,
wow, mind blown. For those who are listening to the podcast who cannot see what Gary just did, he just took a playing card and converted it or magically turned it into a watch. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you for leaving us on that. We really appreciate it, Gary. All the luck in the world. And for everyone else, please go to the improvnetwork.org to check out these conversations and more. Thanks again, Gary.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.